about your Roman name. So I've already gone through the rosters that are here, and inevitably I'm a very good pronouncer of names. It's not to say that I don't make mistakes, but actually my job at graduation in 4 years will be, I most likely will be the person, because that's what I do, of calling out all the names of the graduates as you get your diploma. However, if I do make a mistake in the pronunciation of your name, I do not care. Not because you are anything less, or your name is anything less, but because I know that soon you will be known to me, and for the remainder of your time that you're in my class in high school, not by your English name, but by your Roman name. And so let's talk about how that works. So, if we think about our society and our culture, and I would ask you how many names does an average person have, they would say 3. First, middle, and last. Now, that's not to say that you are limited to that. Some of us have 4 names. Some of us have 5 names. Actually, 2 years ago, pulling into the parking lot early in the morning, I was rear-ended in a small fender bender by someone, and when the officer came to write up the report and whatnot, I remember it was kind of funny, in which he got the license of the driver, looked at it, looked at her, and said, "You have 6 names?" And yes, and there is nothing wrong with that. Now, of your 3 names traditionally, so let's talk about that. Of the 3, which is the most important? I'll give you a moment to think. It is your last name, because that is your family name. It's the name that designates with whom you are related and associated. But let's instead talk about the first 2. Where did your first name come from? Your parents. And where did they get it from? It's whatever they want it to be. Now, are there traditional names that are rather common? Yes. But just because your name differs from that traditional name, doesn't make it any less, and it doesn't even make it weird, because quite frankly, it's whatever your parent wants you to be known as. And so, if they wanted to, they could just randomly choose letters, and that could then become your name. The same for your middle name. You could just string letters one after the other, and it's whatever they want. So, if I were to randomly pick a consonant, let's go with the letter R. And then randomly pick a vowel, let's go with O. And then let's go with another consonant. Let's go with the X. And then let's go with another vowel, let's an A. And then let's go with another, let's go with the Roxas. You could be Roxas. And where did I get that from? By randomly coming up with letters. But for the Romans and what you will have, it is not that way. Now, most of the time I understand that you're probably named after someone in your family. For example, my daughter Emily is named after the grandmother of my wife. It was in honor of her after she had passed away. My youngest daughter, her name is Sarah, and that was just randomly chosen by my wife and I. My wife likes the name. But her middle name, Constance, is the name of my grandmother. And so very often we are named after these people who are important to us in whatever way. But when it boils down to it, it's whatever you and your parent, or whatever your parents decide. For example, my first name is Eric. I almost was named Elad. And why would they name me Elad? Because that's my father's name spelled backwards. My parents were hippies, and they were odd in that way. So thankfully I did not become Elad, my father's name being Dale, which is my middle name. The reason my middle name is Dale is because my dad's name is Dale. Nevertheless, my point is this randomly whatever they wish. So, let's talk about the Romans and their naming system. First and foremost, a Roman too would have 3 names. The first name is going to be known as your praenomen. Praenomen. Let me hear you say it, please. Praenomen. And again, when I ask you to repeat, do it. It does nothing more than help solidify the information in your brain and helps you with the pronunciation. Praenomen. Now in English, when we want to make something plural, we add an S. You can see how that works, with words like child. All you got to do is add an S. English really is stupid, isn't it? Different example. Let's go with something else. Yes. Like, for example, if you wanted to go with the plural of mouse. So all you would have to do is, English. Don't we hate it? Because it is stupid. Nevertheless, in Latin, for a word like praenomen, the way that it becomes plural is with praenomina. And so you add an A. We have words that we have borrowed into English from Latin that are like that as well. For example, if I had a curriculum, which is a racetrack for you, your curriculum, and here is the track of information that we follow. But if you have Latin curriculum, and you're also in language arts, you have that curriculum together to make that plural. In English, it's curricula. And the reason it is like that is because that's one of the ways that Latin makes a plurality. So what is your personal name? Your praenomen. Say it again. Praenomen. It is the name that's just simply what your friends call you, what your mom and dad will call you, whatever it might be. Now, again, how many options for a first name do we have in English? Well, the answer is infinity. You can combine those letters in any length and combination and repetition that you so wish. But in Latin, there were only 16. Now, this number changed over time in that at some point in Rome's history, that number could have been higher, at other times lower, because as society changes, so does culture change, and so does the conventions, like the naming system. And these were they. Which means that in all of Rome, you could count on every single person you met as a Roman citizen having one of these 16 names. And that's why, too, as you can see in front of them all, they all have a standard abbreviation. So for example, if my name is E. Adams, that E doesn't have to be Eric. It could be Edward. It could be Elgar. It could be anything that starts with an E. You do not know it. But whenever you see M, you know that that person's name is Marcus. And so in abbreviations, it helped out tremendously. Now you will notice that there are two versions of each name. If the name in question ends with a US, then that means that is going to be a name assigned to a masculine person. And if it is an A, it is being assigned to a feminine person. And so these then are the names. I'm going to pronounce them for you. Aulus Aula, Gaius Gaia, Decimus Decima, Marcus Marca, Mamercus Mamerca, Quintus Quinta. If your name is Quintus, there's a good chance that you have, or at least have had, 4 siblings. That is because Quintus means the 5th. Same way with Decimus. Now, when I say have had 4 siblings, you must understand that up until about 100 years ago, and especially in ancient Rome, the reason why the life expectancy would be something low, like 40s, is not because somebody would say, back in those days, if you lived to be like 40, you were getting on up in age. That's incorrect. The reason why the number is so low is because of infant immortality. In ancient Rome, half of all children did not live past age 5. I got pneumonia when I was 3 years old. In ancient Rome, I was a goner. My daughter, in her babyhood, got something I call bronchiolitis or something like that. Without modern medicine, she would have been a goner. And so if you have a kid who dies, unfortunately, at age 2, and then one person, for every person that dies at age 2, lives to be 80, then your life expectancy is 41. But that's really skewing it because of the rate of infant mortality. Diseases were just ravaging in the ancient world. And so that is why I say Decimus is the 10th born, but a good chance Decimus does not have 9 brothers and sisters, because probably some of them died. Sextus Sexta, the 6th, Spurius Spuria, Tiberius Tiberia, Appius Appia, Gnaeus Gnaea, Lucius Lucia, Manius Mania, Publius Publia, Rufus Rufa, that's red, Servius Servia, and Titus Tita. And what you're going to do is that you are going to choose a praenomen for yourself. Now, to give you an example of which, when I was a student in your situation, I chose for myself the name Tiberius. So I was Tiberius. Now, I will not know your praenomen, your personal name. Never call it the first name, it's the praenomen. Your second name represents the family name. And by that, I mean like the family reunion family. Now, I don't know about your experience, but my experience when I was carried off to a family reunion as a young child is that I would show up, there'd be all these people I do not know, and I was told by my parents that they were my relatives. They might even have had the same name as I, but I didn't know these people, but I'm talking about your large extended family. And that would be your nomen, the plural of which is nomina. Now, the nomen, as I say here, is your extended family. And you know the experience you have at the family reunion is that this woman descends upon you, and apparently it's your great Aunt Martha, and you don't know who she is, and she's got this flowery dress, and she's grabbing at you, and you're recoiling because it looks like she's about to consume you in that flower dress with a death hug, and your mom's all elbowing you. You give your Aunt Martha a hug, and Aunt Martha, I haven't seen you since. That's the experience we're talking about. The large family, the people that you belong to, is your nomen. Now, there are only 4 options here. There were hundreds in ancient Rome. But I didn't give you hundreds of options because the nomen is not what I'm going to call you by as well. And so there are then the nomina. Caecilius Caecilia, Flavius Flavia, Claudius Claudia, Sempronius Sempronia. And you're going to choose for yourself one of these. So your first name, the praenomen, don't call it the first name, Tiberius, one of 16. The second name, it designates to what larger family you belong. And so I myself, when I was a student, I chose the name Caecilius. Lots of Romans, for quite a bit of time, that's all they went by. Just merely your name praenomen and your name nomen. Over time, however, a third name developed. And the purpose and or nature of this third name was changing over time. Now, I'll give you an example. Everybody has heard of, probably, if I were to go out in the hallways, or even you, name one Roman, there is one person that people will know. And his name was Gaius Julius Caesar. We call him Julius Caesar. And I need to explain about 2 praenomina in just a minute. I'll go back. Nevertheless, Gaius Julius Caesar had a great rival in life whose name was Gnaeus Pompeius. Now, when you had only the praenomen and the nomen, your personal name and your extended family name, over time it developed to where you could get a third name. And this third name is known as the cognomen. And here then are all the cognomina. Now, originally the cognomen was a personal characteristic that you would have. Now, to show you the great arrogance of Caesar's rival, Gnaeus Pompeius, he chose his own. Usually, others would use it to describe you. But he chose as his cognomen, Magnus. And that's why we call him Pompey the Great. He called himself the Great. And he felt as though that was his personal characteristic. Another famous Roman was Marcus. Note, when I always write the praenomina, I never write it out. I always use the abbreviation because they're standardized, only 16. Tullius. British schoolboys all refer to him as Tully. And then Cicero. Now, Marcus Tullius Cicero, the word Cicero, much like Magnus means big, this means chickpea or garbanzo bean. Marcus Tullius Cicero. Marcus is his praenomen. Tullius is his nomen, the large family to which he belongs. Now, originally, the name Cicero would have been a personal identifiable trait. Like I said, garbanzo bean or chickpea. Look in the canned bean aisle, you'll find them. But the famous Kikero did not have a mole or something on his nose that looked like a chickpea. And that's because for him, the cognomen was not a personal trait. Instead, what would happen is that the person who first had that personal trait would then pass down all three names. The praenomen, personal name, the nomen, extended family reunion name, and the personal trait name to their child. And so, at that point, no longer does it become a personal trait, but a branch of that larger Tullius family. And I always then use as an example the following. So I call on a student and I say, okay, do you have the same last name as one of your first cousins? And so they say, yes. And so let's say that I have, I don't know, Billy Smith is cousins with Jimmy Smith. And if you have the same last name as one of your first cousins, then that means your dad and your first cousin's dad are brothers. And Billy's dad is Jeff, and Jimmy's dad is Fred. And so, the equivalency would be that both Billy and Jimmy belong to the Smith family, the nomen, the overarching, but Billy belongs to the Jeff branch of the Smith family, and Jimmy belongs to the Fred branch of the Smith family. And so, over time, that cognomen is no longer the personal trait of the person who has the name, but rather it tells you the branch. And most likely, either his granddad, great-granddad, great-great-granddad, who knows, most likely one of Cicero, the famous orator's ancestors, probably had a personal trait that looked like a chickpea, and he became Chickpea. Another example of this would be, for example, Caesar. Or a very good one would be Rufus. Rufus, or no, even better, let's go with Ahenobarbus. Lucius, first name, Lucius. Domitius, the nomen, or larger family, Ahenobarbus. Red beard. And it does not mean that he had a red beard. It could be that he is merely a part of the Ahenobarbus branch of the Domitius family. Now, I'll give you an example of the greatest of these ways to explain it. Let's take one of the most famous families in all of Rome. And that would be, of course, the Scipio family. Publius Cornelius Scipio. Praenomen, nomen, family name, larger family. Scipio, either a personal trait or telling you the Scipio branch of the larger Cornelius family. Okay, so these are then the cognomina that you will choose from. And again, singular would be cognomen, and the plurality adding the A. Now, as you can see, in Latin, there are masculine and feminine characteristics of words. And for boys, masculine was assigned, and for girls, feminine was assigned. And so if there are two versions of the name, then that means one's the masculine, usually the first one listed, and then the second one the feminine. But you will notice that there are some that only have one version. Names like Ardanes, Audax, Brevis. That merely means that that word has the exact same form in the masculine as the feminine. I suppose somewhat of an explanation would be that we have some names that could be either assigned to a boy or girl traditionally. Again, there is no such thing as a normal name. There is no such thing as an odd name. There are only names, because in our culture civilization, we simply get to make them up. But take things like Taylor. Do you have boys named Taylor? Yes. Do you have girls named Taylor? Yes. And so there are some that obviously could fit the bill for both. And that's in the Latin linguistics. You can see it here. So, what I'm going to do is that I think, unlike what I had planned with these videos, I might post it before you actually choose. As a matter of fact, I think I will. So that you can hear me pronounce every one of these names, and you yourself will have to, of course, learn it and know that that's what I'm going to call you, especially when we return in person, whether it is a week from now, a month from now, this semester, next semester, or even next year. You're in Latin 1, you will eventually be in Latin 2, and so you will be in here one day. And the first time that I see you, I will be calling you by your Latin name, most likely. So these are they. I'm going to read them out. Acer acris, alacer alacris, amains, animosus animosa, ardanes, audax, brevis, canoris canora, capax, clarus clara, clemanes, and of course, we've talked about before, in so many of these, you have so many derivatives. English words that derive their word form from these Latin words. For example, audax, audacious. Brevis, brief, brevity. Animosus, animated. Alacris, alacrity. And so forth and so on. Clemanes, clemency. Do you see all of these English derivatives that come directly from the Latin? All because of that French invasion by the Normans in 1066, and then of course coming directly from Latin with words that essentially were made up in the Middle Ages. Let me continue. Constans, curiosus curiosa, delectatus delectata, dexter dextra, diliganes, duris dura, Felix, and that was my name when I was in high school. My full name was Tiberius Caecilius Felix. I always felt as I was somewhat happy-go-lucky. We get the word felicity and felicitas. And if you're a fan of Harry Potter, the potion that you can drink in which things will go your way, Felix Felicus. It's luck. Lucky. Nevertheless, ferox, formosus formosa, fortis, furtivus furtiva, graculus. Let me scroll. A little bit too far. Gravis, hilarus, honestus honesta, humilus, illustrius illustria, we're going to R there, inganes, ingenuus ingenua, Justus justa, Litus lita, longus longa, loquax, maculentus maculenta, musicus musica, opulentus opulenta, parvus parva, pertinax, pictor, pinguis. Pinguis means plump or fat, but it's the good and like fat and sassy, plump with a fat wallet implication. Mr. Carnes, when he was my student, a tremendous athlete, one of the most successful quarterbacks in Eastside football history, chose the name Pinguis when he was a student in my class. Nevertheless, if you're Mr. Carnes, don't call him Mr. Pinguis, but that's what he was known to me. Nevertheless, placidus placida, potanes, probus proba, pulcher pulchra, regius regia, saevus saeva, sagax, salsus salsa, sinister sinistra, suavis, superbus superba, studiosus studiosa, tacitus tacita, tardus tarda, tristis, walanes, walidus walida, vehemanes, verbosus verbosa, and verus. Now, there is actually one more name. So you got the or I should say the praenomen, your personal name. You've got the nomen, your extended family reunion name. You've got your cognomen, which for y'all will not be indicating a branch, because you're the first one receiving it. It's something that you think will describe you. But then there is another name. And this is a name that is not passed on. If you do something so spectacular, for the Romans it was most likely winning a battle, and the Roman Senate, the governing body, decided that you are so awesome, and that you are so great, and you are so just bad, and I don't mean like evil bad, I mean like Shaft bad, you could receive a fourth name. And that fourth name was known as not praenomen, not nomen, not cognomen, but you could receive what is known as an agnomen. And I use Cornelius Scipio as an example because he received one. The agnomen is not transferable because only you who have earned this are the one who is able to keep it. Now, what Publius Cornelius Scipio did was essentially save Rome. Back in the 200s BC, Rome was engaged in a war, one of three, against the city-state known as Carthage. We'll go over to the map. So essentially, in the 200s BC, so 200 years roughly before the birth of Christ, the city of Carthage, here in northern Africa, was fighting against Rome in a series of wars called the Punic Wars. They're not called the Carthaginian Wars, because Carthage were a bunch of people, settlers of Phoenicia, known as the Punicii, and so the Punic Wars. And in the Second Punic War, there was one man particular. He was terrifying, and his name was Hannibal. He was an undefeatable force of nature, and sometimes the Second Punic War is known as the Hannibalic War. And as such, he kept a full Carthaginian army, terrorizing Italy for almost 2 decades, 16 years longer than you have been alive. And after these 2 decades, you cannot even fathom of how terrifying it would be to live in Rome, to live in Italy, knowing that within a day's march, Hannibal could show up at your town, kill all of the men, rape and enslave all of the women and children. It was a rough time in the ancient world. And so, finally in 202 BC, Publius Cornelius Scipio did what was seen as the impossible. He defeated Hannibal on the battlefield. And he did so in the Carthaginians' backyard. The battle took place in northern Africa. And as such a great accomplishment, the Roman Senate decreed that it would no longer his name simply be Publius Cornelius Scipio. He received an agnomen, and his agnomen was Africus, or Africanus. His son could not be known as Africanus, because the only way to receive an agnomen is to accomplish something so great that you are singled out. Now, inevitably, I know what you are thinking. Can you earn an agnomen? Has anybody ever earned in my class an agnomen? The answer is yes, but it has only happened less than 10 times, 3 of which have been accomplished just this past year. 3 seniors who each had me for a minimum of 3 years of Latin, 1 4 years of Latin, distinguished themselves so greatly that they indeed earned an agnomen. Now, if their children were ever to come to Eastside High School, I'm getting old, to the point of where soon I fear I might start teaching some of the children of my former students. I know for a fact some of them have children old enough. It's just that they no longer live around here. But I start to feel old, one, when I start to become the same age as my students' parents. When I first started teaching here at Eastside, I was Probably half my students, their parents were older than my parents. But now, I'm becoming just as old, if not older, than the parents of my students, a majority of them. At any rate, I'll still feel even older. But if their children come to Eastside and take Latin, which inevitably they will not start out in life with that agnomen. You only earn it by your own individual accomplishment. And so that's it. So these are the Roman names. You have the praenomen, personal name. The nomen, which is your extended family. Cognomen, never call it the family name. It's either the branch family or personal characteristic originally. Because remember, Poppy didn't have it. He gave itself the name Magnus. And thus, he then could pass down that to his son, and that would indicate the branch of the Pompeius family. And then if you do something so great, agnomen. I'll give you an example of someone who did. I taught a student who graduated in 2014. And he was a bit of a wild character. He's done all right. He went to UGA, and he's currently in law school. And at any rate, he and his friends went out carousing one weekend, apparently, and he came to school as a senior. So filled with enthusiasm, he wanted to show me something. And that poor fool, dearly as I love him, as moronic as he could be, but he was dear to me, he had gotten a tattoo. And due to that fact, that it was a tattoo of Latin ilk, I granted to him an agnomen. He became known as Pictus, which means tatted up. And you might ask, what was this tattoo? Well, he had gotten tattooed on his thigh, so he jacked up his shorts and showed me right here that he had been tattooed SPQR, which stands for Senatus Populusque Romanus. I will write it out. SPQR. And as such, it stands for the Roman Senate and People. It is the official mark of the Roman civilization. And in ancient Rome, it stood for Rome itself. Even to this day, you can see SPQR all over modern Rome, both from ancient times, and they have kept that SPQR. You could even get your own tattoo. For example, when you're in person, if you want to go to the bathroom, there is no bathroom pass per se. You're supposed to use your agenda. And instead of me taking the time of quitting, and I'm going to go here, and signing the agenda, which you were supposed to do, I have a stamp. And on that stamp are those letters, which is the representation of Rome, its government, its civilization. Now, it's at this time usually when I explain to you SPQR, the Roman Senate and People, I ask who would like this tattoo. In that, Roman soldiers used to tattoo it on their body. I know several Latin teachers with whom they have tattooed SPQR on themselves. But in order for you to receive the tattoo, all the hands fly up in the air. But then I tell you, it must be, however, tattooed on your forehead. And so many of the hands go down. But many students make the wise decision to put it on there. So let's see if I can make my forehead sweaty teaching all this stuff. And hopefully it showed up, maybe? No? Perhaps? All right. Nevertheless, so that's it. So that's your Roman names. You got 4 of them, 3 of them usually, but if you do something great. Praenomen, nomen, cognomen, and ognomen. And one of my students was tatted up, SPQR, and so he was no longer just whatever he was. He was whatever he was, Pictus, having been painted upon, or tatted up, if you would like. That's it for Roman names.